Alrighty, here we go for another live video. Super excited to be here again with everybody. Let's go ahead and go over some of the ground rules, por favor. So everybody's sending in their birth time. You definitely took some of my hints. Thank you for spelling out the month and the day, especially for those of you who are international. And do not post in the comments your birth information. Only private message me. Hey, everybody, thank you so much for joining on so quickly already. Seems like we're getting into a little bit of a groove with it. And basically what we're going to be doing is I'm going to be taking 8 more astrology charts that you all have submitted, and we're going to be looking at them, talking about astro concepts, getting some themes underway, and hopefully transmitting some lovely Astro-Babble, which I'm starting to like that babble. So thank you everybody for jumping on. And I've messaged a few of you letting you know that you're in the lineup today. Again, if you would like to be in the lineup, please feel free to private message me your birth date, place, and time. Exact time specifically. I need that exact time as well as birthplace. And then likewise, some of you have already submitted your birth information, but the queue is just so freaking long. You're going to have to be patient. I will message you when it's your time though. So yeah, there's that. And then if you would like a little bit more than the teaser, if you would like to learn astrology, I've got my website, Scorpio Rising Astrology, that you can submit for consults, as well as look at the online school for some Astrology 101 stuff. So let's get to it, shall we? The first chart that we're going to be looking at is Jessica's chart. Jessica was born at 7:11 a.m. in Sharon. And that's who we're going to be dissecting first. So we've got Jessica, who has Sun, Uranus, and ascendant in Scorpio. Uranus is directly conjunct the ascendant. So when Uranus, we talked about this a little bit yesterday, actually. When Uranus is close to the ascendant or conjunct the ascendant, all of that unpredictable Uranian energy is channeled directly into the personality, because the Sun is close to the ascendant, and that combo, we can talk about that ego being very scorpionic, so the self being slightly hidden, very emotional, very perceptive, but also slightly passive aggressive. When we think of Scorpio as the water sign that Mars rules, as opposed to Aries, which Mars rules, Aries is outwardly aggressive, channeling that heat that Mars gives outwardly in a cardinal fashion. However, Scorpio is fixed water. It's that icy sign that takes that heat and internalizes it and prefers not to share. So we've got that Sun and Uranus conjunct the ascendant, giving some strong personality traits, but unpredictable personality traits. And then we've got some other stuff happening in the chart too. We've got a packed house with Venus, Mercury, and Neptune all in the second, being ruled by Jupiter in Virgo in the 11th. So there's some interesting financial dynamics and friendship dynamics happening. Let's look at that. So Venus and Sagittarius conjoining Mercury and Sagittarius in the second house of finance. There is a love of money. There's an entrepreneurial spirit there because Mercury does rule business exchange. Sagittarius is that sign that is very sparky, very spunky. There's an upbeat energy there, but Neptune is also present in the second house. Wherever Neptune touches, it's a house that is an area of life that is naturally confusing, slightly addictive, very mystical and wishy-washy. Yeah. So we've got good planets, helpful planets, but there's also this unsure side. There's also this undercurrent of mischief with finance that Jessica has in her chart. However, it is being ruled by Jupiter. Anything being ruled by Jupiter does have a lucky streak to it. Jupiter is conjoined the North Node and the MC up in Virgo in the 11th. Which is really, really great for money coming unexpectedly from friends. But then specifically, we have a lot of just good luck in the friendship department. Although Saturn's here too at 23 degrees, it's farther apart from Jupiter at 6, North Node at 5, and MC at 3. Saturn up in the 11th house is going to make it a little bit difficult to make friends, but Jupiter is here too to cancel out Saturn, although Jupiter is in Virgo in its fall. So not as strong of a Jupiter as I would personally like, but the North Node is here to open that up as well as the MC. We talked about this a little bit as well. Other charts, when the MC is in the 11th, the midheaven is in the 11th, the highest point of the chart is in that house of friendship. It means that this person that we're talking about astrologically, their highest goal in life, or the top of their personal mountain, is to envelop themselves in their tribe, their social group, and make sure that they are able to be of service to those around them. The 11th house is also the house of activism and community projects. And that's really what we see a lot of with Jupiter there, North Node there, and MC there. Saturn's just going to bring a little bit of hesitancy to the equation, going to make it a little bit difficult and restrictive, a little bit picky, especially because Saturn in Virgo tends to bring out that astringent nature of Virgo. Some of you asked a little bit more about the medical astrology stuff. Interesting when we look at having Scorpio on the ascendant with Sun and Uranus, as well as Saturn, Jupiter, and North Node and MC in Virgo. Virgo rules the small intestine, Scorpio rules the large intestine. So we have a lot of energy in the digestive system in this chart already. There's just a lot happening here. Thankfully, there is good liver function, but from a medical perspective, we would need to nourish and heal the gut whenever possible, because there's a lot of signs in those digestive, or there are a lot of planets in those digestive signs that we need to be aware of. Moon in Gemini in the 8th being ruled by Mercury, Mercury in Sagittarius in the 2nd. Interesting when we think about estates, and when we think about taxes as well as death. We talked about mediumship qualities a little bit yesterday. That's one of the indicators. But because the moon is being ruled by Mercury in the 2nd, I think that that's another marker for entrepreneurship, emotionally feeling very conforming, because Gemini is that mutable air sign, the ability to communicate, switch topics, but also talk to people in a variety of ways to make them feel comfortable with processes that are not otherwise comfortable. Working in a counseling role, any chance that you get to open your mouth and guide people through an otherwise sticky process would be an excellent use of your talents. Lots of good stuff there. Mars is in Leo in the 10th, ruling the 6th house of work. So there's a good chance that success will be in the chart throughout the life. Absolutely excellent. One issue is South Node in Pisces in the 5th being ruled by Jupiter and Virgo in the 11th. So the need to make friends is also counterbalanced by this kind of time suck when it comes to children and the home and the creativity, all of the things that the 5th house represents. So the need to balance personal creativity with external creativity, your personal projects that you're working on to satisfy your own kind of creative fire versus those things that you help other people with, or social groups that you belong to. There needs to be a better balance there, because there is this time suck from a personal perspective because the South Node is in Pisces, but there's so much activity happening outside. We need to make sure that you don't turn into Ariel and want to, jump out of the sea when the sea is your home, that kind of thing. Okay, so that's our first chart. Hey, everybody jumping on, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Hey, Tundi. Hey, Annette. Barb, Marie, Craig. Craig, that's a great question. What is a good book to start learning astrology? There are two that I use and that I recommend in all of my online classes as well. The first is The Inner Sky by Stephen Forrest. I'm looking for my copy. I should have it. Somewhere. Yes, an original copy of The Inner Sky by Stephen Forrest, and then Astrology for Yourself by Demetra George. Those are my big two. Those are the ones that I recommend to all of my students. Astrology for Yourself is definitely more in depth, but it's more interactive. Whereas The Inner Sky with Stephen Forrest is more definitions. It's A plus B equals C, which is not necessarily how astrology works, but it is a good primer and a foundation to start learning the craft. Thank you. I appreciate everybody jumping on. Hey, Christine. Love you, girl. Hope everything's going well up in up in up in your direction. I miss you and Dan and everybody so much. Priscilla, tell her I said hey if you see her before I do. Thank you, everybody. Yes, so let's move on to the second chart and we'll keep this ball a-rolling. So we've got Marie. Marie is our second chart. She was born at 5:17 a.m. in Abu Dhabi. And let's go ahead and take a look at her. Ooh, interesting. So the ascendant is at 10 degrees, and then we have Mercury at 15 degrees. It's a loose conjunction, but whenever we put planets in the first house, it's always I really don't care as much about exact conjunctions because they're in the house of self. But the closer they are to the ascendant, the more they'll affect the personality. And having Mercury in an air sign like Aquarius means that Marie has a very swift mind, a very genius type of IQ would be a good way to say it, just because Mercury rules that intellectual mental faculty and Aquarius is known to be that kind of mad scientist archetype. There's a lot of really good mental chemistry right off the bat when we look at Marie's chart. She's also got Saturn in Sagittarius at 2 degrees, conjoining the MC at 0, up in the 11th house of friendship. It's a friendship day, apparently. So we've got good chemistry between Mercury and Saturn to a certain degree there in sign-based sextile. But the idea that Marie would be teaching her friends, sharing ideas with her friends, some of her favorite activities might include playing Words with Friends or Scrabble, intellectual games that involve her quick wit and mind and ability to communicate, or shady games like bridge, where you have to work in teams, but you have to be quick on your toes and communicate kind of under the table, so to speak. So there's that. Absolutely lovely. Little bit of an issue. So we've got the moon at 6 degrees conjoining, or in a loose conjunction, sign-based conjunction, with Neptune at 0 in Scorpio up in the 10th. Neptune is also retrograde, a little bit tricky. Let's look at Mars's placement. Mars is in Capricorn in the 12th at 1, so it is making a sextile to that Neptune. That's interesting. The moon in Scorpio is also ruling the 6th house of health. So this is where we get a lot of our medical placements. The 6th house is the house of health. The 12th house is the house of hospitalizations. When we find the moon involved with all of this, it means that there is going to be that nursing quality to the personality. But then Neptune is here and Mars is here. So there's this idea in Marie's chart that medicine and career and work are ultimately very, very connected. Mars and Capricorn being in the 12th, not necessarily its ideal place, but it is in its exaltation. She would make an excellent head of nursing, where she actually allows some of that that Mars and Capricorn slow burn kind of coal engine train energy to help run a floor of a hospital. She'd be very good at that. Neptune being so close to the moon is a little bit dangerous for emotional ambiguity and boundary issues, but I think because there is a work tie-in, that might actually work within her benefit. Moon in Scorpio is also a little bit more able to dive deep and discover some of those emotional intricacies. Also making a trine to the sun. Hello, a 4-degree loose trine to the sun in Pisces in the 2nd. So we've got good chemistry between making money from what you love and being able to use that medical side in order to get some financial bearing in your life. That's fabulous. That ascendant and Mercury are also making a trine to the lot of fortune and the south node in the 5th. So there's a lot of creativity potential, but the creativity tends to be a time suck. This is the 2nd time that we're seeing the south node in the 5th house. South node in the chart is where somebody loses a lot of their resources. It's where they tend to have all of the energy in that space just pulled out from underneath them. And the 5th house of creativity, children, and sexuality is where Marie has placed her south node in Gemini. So there is this idea that 5th house topics, again, creativity, children, sexuality, tend to almost like quicksand out or lose a lot of that energy, as opposed to kind of giving back to their creator, so to speak. We do have some other stuff here. Let's look at Venus in the third and Aries. That's an interesting place for Venus to be technically in its fall because it's opposing its natural sign of Libra. In the house of communication, neighbors. Yeah, and it's ruling the ninth house of travel. I'm not really a fan of that placement, actually. Let me think a little bit about what that means. It is making a trine to Jupiter and Leo in the seventh. Uh, but the sun is ruling Jupiter and Leo in the seventh. So the idea that spouses will provide a lot of the financial wherewithal, despite work also kicking in there. Venus and Aries, being ruled by Mars and Capricorn in the 12th. Hidden enemies when it comes to neighbors. That's one way to think of it, especially because Venus is in the fall, not in the fall like seasons, but in her fall, in a sign that she doesn't like. The idea that neighbors or the people that surround you in your local community might get a little bit testy or on your nerves. They might be hidden. They might be hidden enemies, or you might actually end up taking them to the hospital because you're just kind of the convenient medical personnel around at the time of their personal fall. Would be a good way to think about that. Let's see, what else do we have? We have Uranus and Cancer retrograde in the sixth, so there's that unpredictability element with work, but Scorpio and Neptune are better at dealing with that than others. Pluto and Leo retrograde. Jupiter is just about 3 degrees away from that Pluto. So it's Pluto at 27, Jupiter at 24, both in Leo, both retrograde in the seventh house of relationships, ruled by the sun in Pisces in the second house of finance. So there is going to be an issue with partners, specifically lifelong partners and money. Although there is Jupiter there, he is in Leo and in retrograde. But ruling the second house of finance where the sun is, I think there's a lot of opportunity for growth there, but because Pluto's there, it was not easy growing into that dynamic until about 50 years old. And then you started to understand, like, oh, just because somebody wears the pants in the relationship or somebody is the technical breadwinner does not mean that they're good with money. Although they might provide money, they might not necessarily know what to do with it. So there is some tricky dynamic when it comes to finance and relationships in Marie's chart with those two planets that are retrograde. Not necessarily ideal in that department. But again, we go back to that quick wit, and as long as Marie keeps her mind sharp and she's able to really get into some mental games and understanding that she can always throw up a spreadsheet or a pros and cons list and let her mind kind of chew things over. That's really how she overcomes a lot of her problems anyway. Cool. So that's Marie's chart. Thank you so much. I appreciate it, everybody. La la la, Connecticut. Thanks, Christine. Jenna, Liz, Brian, live chart work. Yep, that's what we're doing. We are doing some live chart work. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. We are about to get into our third chart. If you would like to submit your personal birth info, please feel free. Just private message me your birth date, place, and exact birth time. I need that exact birth time and spell out the month and the day just so that we don't get confused. And that will be that. Also, you can always sign up for a consult if you'd like something a little bit more in depth. But we are on our third chart of the morning. And our third chart of the morning is Donna. Hey, Donna, how's it going? Donna was born at 8 a.m. in New Bedford. And, goodness, Donna. Goodness gracious. That is a very impressive Scorpio stellium in the first house. So we've got Venus at 0 degrees Scorpio, Sun at 3 degrees Scorpio, Ascendant at 12 degrees Scorpio, South Node 16 degrees Scorpio, Neptune 21 degrees Scorpio, and Mercury 27 degrees Scorpio. That's a six astrological significator pile up in Scorpio in the first house. That is crazy town, Donna. So let's continue to talk about Scorpio in the first house, shall we? So as as most of you know, Scorpio Rising Astrology is my astrology brand because I also have Scorpio Rising. I have the ascendant as well as Pluto in Scorpio conjunct my ascendant in the first house. So I'm very fond of my Scorpio ascendants and my people with strong Scorpio placements. And here's what I've learned about being a Scorpio ascendant with some heavy Scorpio themes in my chart. We tend to be naturally intuitive, but creepily intuitive, not like the kind Cancer type intuitive or the kind of etheric, again, wishy-washy Pisces intuitive. We tend to be the scary kind of intuitive, the ones that are able to know things before people know them, but in a way that makes them feel exposed, in a way that makes them feel like they are in danger, and they should feel like they are in danger. But at the end of the day, the only reason why we have such piercing intuition is to protect ourselves from harm. It's kind of that detective precognizance that we really enjoy having to make sure that our deepest, darkest secrets don't get brought to light, so that we can actually expose the deepest, darkest secrets of others as a defense mechanism. And that's always lovely. We tend to be isolating. We tend to be a little bit frigid. We tend to need to break up our emotions a little bit because there are a lot of them, but it's much easier to just put them on ice and not deal with them. So Scorpio does tend to have emotional baggage just throughout the life. With so many planets here, Donna, we definitely need to make sure that you're doing some very intense emotional work throughout your life, because Scorpio, so much Scorpio energy in your chart needs to be unpacked by somebody who can handle that style of personality very, very readily. It's tricky. Not everybody can go deep with Scorpio. It's just a sign that tends to evade and elude, and because of that, it gets a lot of criticism or put in a box like Scorpio is hypersexual. Well, it's hypersexual for a lot of reasons. You know, Scorpio is a little bit too deep, dark, and depressed. Well, it's deep, dark, and depressed for a lot of reasons. It's not necessarily good or bad. It's just Scorpio likes to play around in the underworld. It's where it feels comfortable, where it feels safe. And unless somebody's able to go down there with you, you're going to find a lot of isolating tendencies in social groups, especially because Mercury in Scorpio is ruling your 11th house of social groups. So there's a lot of Scorpio stuff in Donna's chart. Basically, she's a super Scorpio. But then we have Mars and Virgo ruling the 6th house of work. So she tends to do a lot of social activism for her work. It wouldn't surprise me if she was, if she worked for a nonprofit, if she did a lot of outreach, or worked with people in a humanitarian fashion for what she did for a living. What somebody does for a living is also different from their career or vocation and how they make money. Astrology differentiates those between the 2nd house, how we make money, the 10th house, our career or our vocation, and the 6th house, basically the day job, what we do for work. But she's got her moon in Aries in the 6th, which means that she loves what she does. It's something that she always feels personally gratified with. She loves showing up to work because of how she approaches her work, not necessarily what she does, but how she approaches it, which is in that kind of farmer-like fashion of tending to the fields and making sure that everybody has what they need. Jupiter in Leo in the 10th is a great signifier for fame and it's making an exact square. Whoa. The square is separating, so it's not super great, but it is making a 3-degree exact square to the 3-degree Jupiter in Leo. The sun in Scorpio is. So there is this idea of personality conflicting with what her career destiny is really asking her to do, which is step up to the plate in more of a famous or public role. And I think that, Donna, one of the things that you'll need to get over is you can't be in the shadows forever. And when it comes to Jupiter and Leo in the 10th being ruled by the sun in the 1st, there is a big piece of you that resonates with what you are kind of predestined to do for your vocation. And because of that, it's going to throw you in the spotlight a lot more than you feel personally comfortable with. The sooner you can accept that, the better. The more you can work on that, the better. But the world kind of needs you, Donna. And that's part of what Jupiter and Leo being ruled by the sun in the 1st means, is your personality is the medicine for the vocation that you've chosen, which means that the people around you are naturally going to lift you up and put you in that kind of authoritative kingly Leo role where the spotlight is on you because you have what it takes to go the distance. So that's a really lovely thing that we can talk about with Donna. And just to reemphasize again, anybody with really strong Scorpio placements needs to watch the gut, the reproductive areas, the sinuses, as well as the bladder. Those are the 4 physical areas that Scorpio rules from a medical astrology perspective. And when we see a pile up, a stellium in any particular sign, each sign rules a body system, and Scorpio just so happens to rule the caves of the body. So Donna needs to make sure that her sinuses are constantly monitored. They will also be a thermometer for anything going wrong in the body. If the body's out of balance, the sinuses will be one of the first places to go. Likewise, the colon, the reproductive area, and the bladder are all areas that are naturally going to be kind of those signifiers for Scorpio that something is off if those systems are off. Yep. But then again, all of the Scorpio ascendant stuff is ruled by Mars and Virgo in the 11th. So Mars being in Virgo, the sign of the small intestine, again, we have a lot of gut stuff that seems to be coming up from a medical astrology standpoint this morning. So that's a little bit about Donna. Thank you everybody who's sending in their stuff now. I appreciate all of the things, and I will add you into the queue. There's a lot of queue. Thank you everybody. Thank you. Hello from the UK. Good morning, Randy, Zaya from Turkey. Yes. Lovely. Thank you so much. Yeah, continue to send in the messages with your birth date, place, time. I'll put you in queue. I've got a long queue lined up, but I am keeping track of who's where. And yeah, I just need that birth date, place, and exact birth time. If you don't have that exact birth time, I can't be as accurate as I would like to be. I really pride myself on the accuracy of the work based on the ascendant placement. Okay, let's go into Devra's chart. Devra was born at 6:30 p.m. in Chicago, and let's go ahead and take a look. Oh, we've got first house, 7th house oppositions. So going back to Sunday when we were seeing all of those, I think it was Sunday. Sunday when we were seeing all of those. No, it was Saturday. The first time that we did the live cast, there were so many charts with the first house, 7th house opposition. So we'll get to talk a little bit about that. Again, all hail Scorpio. Scorpio's pulling up really, really good stuff. She's got Pluto, Saturn, and Mars and Scorpio in the 2nd. We'll talk about that. Moon in Aries. Moon in Aries ruling the MC in the 10th. Sun in Aries. She's new moon baby. That's interesting. Lots of cool stuff in Devra's chart. Let's dive into it, shall we? So she's got this Libra ascendant at 15 degrees. Unfortunately, it's being opposed by her new moon birth, her moon and her sun at 18 and 12 degrees in Aries, respectively, opposing that Libra ascendant. So there's an idea that the ego and the emotions are naturally hidden because the moon has lost its light. So the idea that partners, specifically that Devra chooses, will be on the emotionally withdrawn side, just because that is the formation that's in her 7th house. It's naturally opposing her ascendant, which is in Libra. Let's look to Venus. Venus is in the 6th in Pisces, so she's a natural caregiver, somebody who loves to just understand what people are feeling and to help them with their woes and to apply that like really soothing balm to all of the wounds of their spirit. Mercury is in her exaltation in Venus, which is a great place to have her in Pisces, and that's just glorious. Unfortunately, that Venus in Pisces can't see the moon and the sun in the 7th, so there's this constant theme of what Devra does, who she is, and how she works is this person who wants to give and care for others. Unfortunately, the spouses that she chooses, the people who she holds closest to, symbolized by that 7th house of relationships, are going to be hidden from her, are going to be slightly macho aggressive, slightly overly Aries would be a good way to say it, because the sun is exalted in Aries. It's a very powerful fire energy, but the moon is hidden behind the sun. It's just a sliver of a moon, so there is no emotional relation to that connection. And unfortunately, we would need to look at some remediation for that. So let's talk about how we would remediate that new moon in Aries. And we would go to the ruler of Aries, which is Mars. She has her Mars and Scorpio in the second. So the way that we would actually unlock her relationship potential is through the second house principles of wealth and finance, oddly enough. Understanding that the person in the relationship is going to be connected to the house of finance. It's going to largely be a financial relationship, and understanding that the language of money can be a language of love. Understanding the love language of gift giving specifically, instead of things like quality time, instead of things like physical touch, the more traditional intimacy languages, we would need to understand that because the relationship dynamic in Deborah's chart is so financially based and so second house wealth based, there's going to be this idea that the key to unlocking the heart of the partner is through understanding what value you bring to the table and how that value can translate into the level of love that someone is willing to give. Spontaneously showing up with flowers or a piece of jewelry or buying tickets to a vacation would be 10 times more lovely than chilling on the couch watching Netflix. Although Deborah's Mercury and or Venus and Pisces ruling the ascendant would love nothing more than to just kick back, relax, and enjoy an alcoholic beverage on the sofa, because Venus is all about that loving, relaxed energy in Pisces. But unfortunately, that is not the language that she is predetermined she will receive in her chart. Interesting dynamics with Mercury in Taurus in the 8th, opposing directly, not exact opposition, at 1 degree, the Pluto in Scorpio in her second. It's a separating opposition, but it's still an opposition nonetheless, being ruled by Venus in the 6th. So the idea that what she does for work and how she communicates might actually get her into a little bit of financial trouble. One of the things that I'd like to give Deborah the insight on is Mercury in Taurus likes to say things the way that they like to say things, and Venus in Pisces tends to be a little bit loose-lipped when it comes to love and affection. Because that's naturally opposing Pluto and Scorpio, you need to be very careful about what you say at work. You need to be very careful about contracts. You need to be very careful about what it is that is being imposed upon you rule-wise in the work setting, because bosses or people that supervise you might actually not appreciate how lovey-dovey you are in the workspace, and that might actually get you into some financial trouble as well. So we just need to be careful about that. But let's go ahead and look at Jupiter in Capricorn in the 4th, sign of a big house, big home, big old home, especially because it's ruled by Saturn in the 2nd. Scorpio retrograde, not great. So the home might actually be a little bit broken down, but the house will be big. It's like that scene in The Craft when they get into the new house and the roof is leaking, but it's big. That's the house. That's the big old house that Deborah's kind of signed up for in her chart, always having that big home. Neptune also in the 4th house, so the idea of potentially getting lost in that big house. But specifically, when we see Neptune in the 4th, we need to be a little bit careful about chemical sensitivities, drug issues in the home space, but also making sure to lock the liquor cabinets, making sure that there's no mold or infestation. Neptune tends to bring this slightly toxic, infectious energy to the surface. And I find that when it comes to substances in the 4th house with Neptune, we just need to be slightly aware of that. But I mean, Venus in Pisces and Mercury in Taurus, that relationship will naturally bring a level of intuition that I think Deborah will be able to kind of sniff out things before they actually get too bad. Moon in Aries is also making an exact square to the MC. Again, self-confidence issues when it comes to the career. There's going to be a natural holding back of work potential because of that new moon energy in the 7th. I think that one of the things that Deborah might do is she might refuse a promotion because it takes her away from her relationship, or thinks it takes her away from her relationship. But the actual thing about a promotion is that it means more money, which means more value, which means that it will actually undercurrently strengthen the relationship by the financial aspects that we already talked about in her chart. So that's interesting. Thank you, everybody, for your comments. So that's Deborah's chart. Good morning, everybody. Hello, hello, hello. Could you explain in one of your Facebook Lives what each house in the zodiac represents and means for newbies? Melody, I actually have a class on that. If you would like to purchase that class through the online school, it's $25. It's the houses in astrology. It's a good hour plus video of me going through each one of the houses, their significations, and sharing personal stories about what I've found in the houses along the way. But you'll be able to pick up an astrology book anywhere with the houses, and you could even Google what the houses mean, but just really kind of take charge of your own education from that perspective. There's too much for me to talk about in a Facebook Live because I can't talk about charts and Astrology 101 at the same time. I'm doing my best to kind of mash them all together. But check out that online course that I have through my website, Scorpio Rising Astrology, and you should get those answers through that course or just by getting the information for free online. You just need to use a little bit of initiative there. Okay, let's go into chart number 5. Chart number 5 is Corinne's chart. Corinne, who was born at 2:30 a.m. in Easton. And let's go ahead and look at what's happening here. Okay, so the ascendant in Gemini has Mars in Gemini, very, very close to it, 4-degree separation, but still pretty close. Mars has been making a trine to the MC in Aquarius in the 9th. Where's Gemini? Or Mercury. Mercury in Cancer retrograde, boo. In the second house of finance, Venus in Cancer, Sun in Cancer in the second. Ooh, Moon is enclosed in the 3rd in Leo. Oh, goodness. Goodness gracious. We've got some things to talk about here. Okay. So we need to talk. Oh, they're in mutual reception. Okay, so we need to talk about finance and teaching. Finance, teaching, and writing. Okay, so here's a concept about rulership that I think y'all will appreciate. So each house is ruled by a sign, right? And the sign that's on that house, we look to the planet that rules that sign to talk about what that house will then be connected to in the person's life. In this example, Corinne has the ascendant in Gemini, the first house in Gemini, which means we look to Mercury for what's ruling the ascendant. The ascendant in Gemini is ruled by Mercury in Cancer in the second house of finance and wealth, which we just got done talking about. Mercury retrograde is also in Cancer. So Mercury in the second is ruled by the moon in Leo in the third house of communication, teaching, and neighbors, as well as siblings, which is then in Leo ruled by the sun back in Cancer in the second. So we've got this really interesting synergy. Her chart is packed in the first, second, and third houses. So we're really going to need to delve into how those interconnect and how Corinne can use those traits to her advantage. So there are 3. I know that y'all have seen this Facebook meme. There are 2 wolves inside of you. In Corinne's case, there are 3 wolves inside of you. There's the Gemini wolf, the Cancer wolf, and the Leo wolf. Your ascendant in Libra tells us a lot about, again, all of those intellectual properties. You're great with language for multiple reasons. You have a swift mind and tend to get a little bit mentally aggressive. But then we look at the Cancer wolf, and the Cancer wolf, symbolized by your Sun, Venus, and Mercury, all in the second house in Cancer, talk about your caregiving nature, your nicety, your need to be, especially from a financial space, protective and kind of mother bear-ish about that area of life and wealth. Then we have the third wolf, metaphoric wolf, that is your moon in Leo, as well as Saturn and Pluto in Leo in the third, which is all about your need to shine, your need to be more flamboyant, your need to be a little bit more creative, dramatic, and speak up about who you are, what you do, and how you feel. So we've got these three houses that are intimately connected in your chart. And I think that if you haven't considered becoming a writer, you definitely should, because it seems like your finances would love that, your personality would love that, and your ability to write, although it's not necessarily going to be easy because we have Saturn and Pluto in that third house. Saturn is that planet that matures around the time of our first Saturn return, so 28 to 30, depending on when that exact return is. And then Pluto is that level 50 planet. So it's wherever we find Pluto, it's that place in our lives that only matures when we hit about 50. So when you hit, so in 1997, ish would have been that year for you. Just giving you a little bit of stuff there. And that's part of the dynamic that I think you should now at this time be able to master in your life, using your life experiences to actually generate a teaching, a writing skill that would be very valuable and very personally satisfying to you as you move forward, especially if it revolves around the topics of finance, of wealth, of how to make money, sustain money, and create personal securities through what you own. Because the second house is in Cancer, wouldn't surprise me if real estate was on the table. Having an Airbnb, or specifically like a multifamily complex that you own, run, and operate. But writing is really the big thing that I'd like to focus on, writing and teaching, and making sure that that's a big part of your life, because everything just keeps pointing back to those themes. Yeah, I think that's pretty much about it. That's the core of Corinne's chart, is those first three houses. So quick, easy, simple, but powerful topics nonetheless. Okie dokie. So those are those. Thank you everybody for continuing to bombard me with messages. Yes, so birth date, place, and exact birth time is what you need to turn in. If you would like to look at some of the previous videos, just search on YouTube for Scorpio Rising Astrology, and you'll be able to see the videos from the past couple days. I'll put this video on there too. And yes, hi Sam, do you let each person know? Yes, so I've gotten into the habit. This is a new thing, everybody, so bear with me as I kind of work out the kinks. But this morning I messaged everybody to let them know when I was going to talk about their chart. So I'm making the list, checking it twice, and doing those things as I can. Let's see. So next we have to talk about Deborah, who was born at 2:31 a.m. in Pottstown. Okie dokie. So this is chart number what? Chart number 6. So we've got two more after this. Deborah's chart, we've got ascendant in Aries conjoin the South Node. So those are some self-esteem issues. Saturn conjunct the MC. That's a really interesting placement. Clearly career driven. Another new moon. We've got moon in Gemini applying to the new moon in Sun in Gemini at 14. Then Mercury in Gemini in the third. So again, like triple writing potential when we look at that. The issue is, again, that self-confidence and really delving to the depths of the emotional state with that. Let's see, another Venus in Cancer in the fourth. She's Octomom at home. And when I say Octomom, I mean just like picture that octopus mother that has all of those arms, just like reaching around and grabbing and taking care of multiple people, multiple things, multiple babies all at the same time, like with a kissing stamp, just pop, 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 putting kisses on the forehead like those old cartoons. That's Venus and Cancer in the fourth right there. Let's see what else. We've got Neptune in Scorpio, Pluto in Scorpio retrograde in the 8th, being ruled by Mars and Leo in the 5th. That's not a nice one. Not really a big fan of that for a couple reasons. 8th house is the house of death. 5th house is the house of children, creativity, and sexuality. So there is some kind of darker themes to Deborah's chart as well. especially because we've got that Jupiter in Scorpio retrograde, along with Neptune in Scorpio retrograde in the 8th. So there is some toxicity there with the Mars making a square to Neptune from the House of Children. I'm not really a big fan of that placement, especially because Mars in Leo is making a trine to the ascendant, loose trine, but a trine to the ascendant. Part of those self-esteem issues might actually arise from premature deaths in the family. Not necessarily ideal. But one of the ways that we can recover from that is by activating the potential of Saturn and the MC. So Saturn is in Capricorn, although it is retrograde in the 10th. So there's the idea that Deborah, throughout the course of her life, is a lifelong career pursuer, or somebody who's working steadily to their vocation over time. When in doubt, I would highly suggest Deborah throw herself into her work, throw herself into her long-term vision, get some vision boards out, and really start to chip away at what makes that Saturn and Capricorn side of her really feel motivated to succeed over the long term. Understanding that nothing takes place overnight. The events that do seem spontaneous are actually years and decades in the making, and we can really unlock a lot of potential from work over time instead of just looking for the quick result. Because Deborah's also got Pluto at 1 degree of Virgo, making a loose trine to that MC, and Saturn at 5 in Capricorn. The Pluto's in the 6th for Deborah. So the idea that work, especially early days of work, would have been potentially toxic, not necessarily like overly detailed toxic, too complicated. But now that Deborah has started to gain some life experience and gain some skills, it wouldn't surprise me if she stayed with the company for a very, very, very long time and is now able to master a lot of the skills that she found very, very daunting in the beginning. Those are the kinds of things that we see when Pluto and Saturn actually get along, is there is an amazing chemistry, in this case between the work and career house, about how somebody is able to master a skill over time, as opposed to that, jumping in like an adaptive Gemini quality, just jumping into something and being able to snap their fingers and say, oh, I did it. One of the things that she might actually feel very adaptive about, though, is writing and teaching, because Mercury is ruling that Pluto in Virgo in the 6th. So again, back to the idea of making sure that writing, teaching, working in neighborhood communities as well is part of the picture, with the Sun and the Moon and Mercury all in that 3rd house. I think that's a big part of Deborah's chart that we need to embrace and acknowledge. Because Mars in Leo is ruling the 1st house, and the ascendant in Aries, there is an idea of creativity being very important. Making sure to have creative outlets will be extremely important, despite the workaholic tendencies. Separating work from fun will be a challenge, but it will be a challenge that will definitely fuel Deborah's spirit. I think if we understand that, like, creating something just for the sake of creating something, not necessarily needing for it to be sold or for it to hang in the home, it could be just throwing a lump of clay on a pottery wheel and making the ugliest pot somebody has ever seen, but that act of making that pot discharges so much emotion and gets those creative fires going that it takes a lot of those time-based stressors out of the climb to the top of the personal mountain. Yep. So that's Deborah's chart. Thank you so much, everybody. Yes. Lovely. Thank you. I appreciate it. Let's go ahead and we've got 2 more charts in just about 12 minutes to do it. So we've got to zip. Okay, now we've got Christina. Christina was born at 2:31 a.m. in Elizabeth, and we will now proceed to look over Christina's chart. I knew I liked you, Christina. You've got Scorpio rising just like me. Scorpio at 16, actually our ascendants are super close. Ascendant at 16 degrees. We've also got Saturn, Pluto, and Mars, all of the Scorpio, in the 1st house. So again, back to what I said earlier in the video about having multiple planets in Scorpio in the 1st. There's going to be so much of that scorpionic energy, that hidden energy, that overly emotional detective energy makes you really, really good at the things you decide to pursue and really, really bad at mundane things that people this is one of the things about Scorpio ascendants that I find really, really interesting is we are like scarily good at the things we choose to pursue, but then ask us to do a mundane task and we look at it like it's an alien and we don't understand how to possibly do it, because we're so nuanced in what we're good at. There is a level of social dysfunction there as well. What I think is super interesting is we've got a stacked second house of finances, including Jupiter and Sagittarius in the second house and its proper rulership, but we've got multiple points of chaos here in the house of finances as well. We've got the South Node, which is that energy suck. We've got Neptune, which brings confusion, and Uranus, which brings unpredictability. However, Venus is in there in Sagittarius as well. So both benefic planets, as well as the benefic that is the sect light in the second house of finance, being ruled by Jupiter. It's so weird because you've got all of this luck in the second house. You've got all of this abundance and this prosperity in the second house. And then all of a sudden you bring in the South Node, Uranus and Neptune, and they're like, where did it go? Where did it go? Where did all of this abundance that was just here 2 seconds go? It's either hiding behind a curtain or it got blown up or somebody stole it. And I think that that's a really interesting dynamic for the financial house to be so packed. Oh, well, that's kind of where it comes in. Yeah, okay. We need to talk about the eighth house as well then. So the South Node in the second house represents where things are lost, where things have come from. So having the South Node, in addition to being an energy suck, it's also where talents have previously been acquired. So Christina already learned how to do money in a previous life, if you wanted to think of it that way. It's a talent that she just knows very well. Water signs, especially Scorpio, tend to be good with money if their placements are on cue, just because finance, taxes, and the mysteries of power when it comes to money are very attractive to a Scorpio. Then we have the North Node in Gemini in the eighth. North Node in Gemini in the eighth is, when we look at the North Node, it's where somebody is going towards. It's their life direction, their personal compass when it comes to their soul's mission in this experience. And so because we've got North Node and Gemini in the eighth, part of Christina's mission is to learn how to use other people's money to develop a customer base, to understand how finance works when it comes through tax, when it comes through accounting, when it comes through managing other people's resources, not necessarily managing her own, which she's known how to do already. So understanding that one of the reasons why financial seems so confusing is because she's too close to the issue. But if she's actually able to step back and look at other people's finance and look at how other people use money, there is a teaching opportunity there that I think is really beneficial. So getting on track with some financial education would definitely be, especially when it comes to the nuanced stuff of like maybe even taking accounting classes, working with or having lots of friends who are CPAs, especially because Mercury in Taurus is ruling the 11th house of Virgo and the 8th house of death, but also taxes and business. Mercury in Capricorn and the Sun in Capricorn in the third talk about writing and teaching, but a slow climb to writing and teaching. Identifying as a teaching archetype is definitely something that is present in the chart, although Saturn and the Ascendant make that a little bit difficult. It definitely came forward during the first Saturn return because that lit up the Mercury Sun in the third. But the idea that Mercury is in Capricorn, slowing it down, and it's stationed just before it would have gone retrograde, that's not necessarily ideal. So we do have teaching in the blood of Christina. We do have education and writing in Christina's blood. However, it is slow. It's a slow fermentation process and needs to be clarified. But I think that especially when it comes to finances and accounting, that's really where Christina's chart is pulling her. Especially because we've got markers for entrepreneurship. Mars in Scorpio is ruling the moon in Aries in the sixth of work and health. So working in the health field, but specifically working as a small business owner. That's absolutely excellent. The sun in Capricorn in the third of writing and communication is also ruling the 10th house of career. So another marker for writing or speaking as an entrepreneur, something that Christina will definitely have throughout her lifetime. There's a lot of good stuff in the chart, but we're running out of time, so we gotta focus on other things. Thank you, everybody. Yes, yes, yes. Lovely. I appreciate it. We've got one more chart and then we are done for the day. Make sure to submit yours if you're interested in continuing on this journey with me. So Jason is our last chart. Jason was born at 4:20 a.m. in Fitchburg. That's lovely. And we've got Virgo. We've got triple Virgo. We've got ascendant, moon, sun in Virgo with Mercury in Virgo, retrograde, boo. But it is within 1 degree of the sun, so it is technically on the edge of the heart of the sun in Cazimi, just the edge of the Cazimi. So let's talk about what Virgo means for the first house. We've talked a lot about Scorpio this session. Let's talk a lot more about Virgo. A couple of days ago as well, when the moon went into Virgo, I did this big post on Virgo. Virgo gets somewhat of a bad rap, I gotta say, because everybody kind of knows that Virgo is a little bit anal retentive, very picky, very fussy, tends to clean, loves order, and all of those things. But Virgo is actually a very dependable sign. Virgo knows how to isolate value very well. Virgo is a very mentally acute sign because it is ruled by Mercury. It has a very quick wit, that very witty English kind of sense of humor that's a little bit dry but very pointed. When we look at having so much Virgo on the ascendant, there's an idea that Virgo ruling the small intestines comes into the picture, and that being a very important medical part of the chart. But also just embodying everything that is Virgo, researching Virgo as a sign and knowing that every single piece of that applies to you, Jason. And that's just a big part of your chart dynamic. And unfortunately, there's no real way to escape that because we've got the ascendant, the moon, and the sun, the three major signifiers for personality, all in the house of personality, that first house, all in Virgo, along, just in case you're wondering, the lot of fortune as well. So all of the small intestine stuff, as well as Virgo co-rules the liver, but there's just so much, like your hyper Virgo. So if you just wanted to work within that space, that's pretty much, I'd say a good 80% of your chart. We do have Jupiter in Gemini, which is making a square to the ascendant. So the idea that fame is something that Jason isn't necessarily comfortable with, especially because Jupiter is retrograde in Gemini, but ruled by retrograde Mercury in Virgo. I think that fame, when it comes to personality, is actually something that Jason will receive because that natural placement is a little bit too exact with the ascendant, but it's going to be very awkward and uncomfortable. If you can make that sense of awkward and uncomfortable work for you, Jason, I think that would be an excellent way for you to break out of your shell, understanding that even in your most awkward moments, if you have something of value to say, if you have words that you have pre-scripted with your Virgo preciseness that have a strong message behind them, the words will carry you. You don't necessarily need to use the weight of your personality. And I think that a great example of that is Temple Grandin. As just a role model, she is very, very heavily on the spectrum, and she talks a lot about that in her work, but she uses her ideas and her awkwardness to her advantage because she is so savant-like. And I think if we use all of that Virgo paired with that Jupiter in the 10th, you'd be able to mirror some of those qualities and get your message out to more people without feeling like you're being pompous or grandiose, because the words really carry the weight of your presentation instead of the personality. Then we have some awkward stuff in the second house. Venus is in Libra in the second, which is glorious for finance, but Mars is also in Libra. Mars is in its fall in Libra, and it's 7 degrees away from Venus, close enough. We also have Pluto in Libra in the second house. So we've got some good financial stuff and some not good financial stuff. We need to be aware of impulsive spending, that Mars quality, and also making sure that we really allow that Libra to temper that Mars quality. So Mars likes to do things quick, and when it comes to finances, nothing should really be done quick. It's an Earth quality energetic. And so Libra is actually helping you in that way, because when you go to purchase something, you waffle over it a million times, which is what Libra is supposed to do. And that actually curbs a lot of that impulse spending. So as long as you understand that, that's actually there to help you, to save you financially. And if you go back and forth on something 3 or more times, it's not worth it. That's kind of part of the magic of that placement. We've got just a couple more aspects, and then we'll wrap up with Jason's chart. North Node in Scorpio in the third, reconciling with siblings, working with neighbors, especially neighbors who are closeted, neighbors who are isolated, and getting them out of their shells, working with writing and communication, part of that North Node quality of something that Jason should strive for, talking about things that are uncomfortable, especially when it comes to wealth. Because Mars in Libra rules that North Node in Scorpio in the third. South Node in the ninth, though, talks about Jason already having that education behind him, already having the travel background, the exposure to foreigners. It comes very naturally to him, the idea of other cultures and what their value is in society, and understanding the how he relates to just that travel house in general. When we look at a South Node in the ninth, it's somebody who looks at a National Geographic show or a magazine and says, yeah, I kind of feel like I've been there already. I've been there, done that, bought the t-shirt. And instead, it's more about teaching people based on that experience in this go around, especially when we look at some of the teaching stuff. You've got Uranus and Scorpio in the third. So back to that idea of that awkward, spontaneous, disruptive teaching style of Uranus coming to the surface, really making sure that Gemini, that Jupiter retrograde in Gemini awkwardness gets a chance to shine and really kind of in a way spice up or bring some unexpected hilarity to your presentations once you embrace that awkwardness and are able to, again, let the words carry the weight instead of worrying about being too Jupiterian, too moving. Yep. So that's that. Hi, Vicky. Hi, Deborah. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. So this is it. Tomorrow we will be picking up with Tony. Tony is the first person that we're going to be working with. And then we've got some other charts as well. I know a lot of you are messaging me about where you are in the queue. I can let you know, but I haven't been able to look at a lot of your birth time. Some of you have not submitted a time. Some of you are saying, well, it's about this, it's about that. I don't care if it's about noon within a couple hours. A couple minutes can change an entire chart. So we really need an exact birth time, especially if some of you are experiencing the readings that I'm dishing out and you're like, well, that doesn't necessarily make sense. I would highly encourage you to check your birth time, because it might not be the information that I was given. The chart alignment doesn't necessarily match up. So thank you, everybody, for looking. Again, if you'd like to watch the replay for today, check out the YouTube channel, check out the other videos from the other day, and make sure to check out ScorpioRisingAstrology.com for consults with me. And then also, if you would like to look at classes, you can look at the online classes. I have classes on planets, signs, charts, and aspects coming soon, which will be really fun. So I'll talk to y'all later. See ya.